third parties and why we have a two-party tradition. Our electoral system makes it almost impossible for third-party candidates to be successful in this country. One of the reasons is that a lot of state election laws make it difficult for third-party candidates to get on the ballot. In order to get on the ballot, they have to circulate a petition, get a certain number of eligible voters to sign the petition to show that they have viable chance of winning something in the election. They're ever hardly asked to debate with the major candidates. In fact, in order to debate, they have to show that they are able to raise a certain amount of money, and they have to show that they're polling at certain support. So in order to get to a debate, prior to the debate being scheduled and organized, you have to be polling at numbers at like 7 to 12% of the American population supporting you, which is pretty difficult to do, especially if the American people have been unable to hear your message. They aren't as well funded as a major candidate, and this makes sense. Why would a 527 organization or a super PAC spend any money on commercials for somebody that they know is not going to win the election? Why would a political action committee spend money or donate any money to a political candidate that they know isn't going to win? And the catch-22 of that situation is they're never going to win unless they get support from outside assistance or at least PAC donations. That in the United States, we have a history of a two-party ideological system. We like two groups fighting each other, just the loyalists and the patriots did prior to the American Revolution. The large states versus the small states in the Constitutional Convention, and the Federalist versus the Anti-Federalist. Okay, so if they're so weird, what are these things? What are third parties? We know that Teddy Roosevelt was a somewhat successful or at least recognizable third-party candidate. He never won a presidential election as a third-party candidate, but he did break off from the Republicans and become a Bull Moose Party supporter. Now, compared to Europe, the United States does not have the same kind of party loyalty you would find in the European countries. In Europe, you are a card-carrying member of a party. You have an idea that your party can succeed, no matter how weird or small it may be. In the US, most voters are satisfied that their beliefs will fall under one party or the other, but not in Europe. Not in Europe. They have this thing called coalition voting, where you support a little political party. You would vote for a little minute political party. You know that once they go to Parliament, they're going to join up with another major political party that will help make them succeed in their policies. So that would be like if I formed what can my political party be? The Pup Pup Party, right? So I formed the Pup Pup Party. My Pup Pup Party looks most like the Republicans. So you're going to be willing to vote for me knowing that once I go into Congress, I'm just going to join up with the Republicans and get a couple of Pup Pup policies passed. There are different types of third parties. There's ideological, splinter, single issue, or protest. When political parties form, they form as one of these three. An ideological party tends to be one that's on the edge of the spectrum. Like libertarian is at the edge of, or at the right of the political spectrum, and socialist is to the left of the political spectrum. Ironically, the Socialist Party has run a political party candidate in every single presidential election since Eugene Debs was representing the political parties in the turn of the 19th, 20th century. There are splinter parties. Splinter parties break off from the main parties, like the Bull Moose Party that Teddy Roosevelt represented broke off from the Republicans. Or like if the Tea Party were to break off from the Republicans, that would be a splinter party. You have single issue political parties. These are political parties that address one particular issue and don't really worry about anything else. Like the Free Soilers or the Greenback Party. And then you have protest party. A protest party could be against some kind of economic policy. That would also be the Free Soilers and the Greenback parties. Okay, I'm going to the next slide. Why the United States will always have a two-party system. It is explained in Duverger's law, which states that single-member plurality electoral systems favor a two-party system. This law gives a mechanical and psychological explanation for this effect. But first you have to understand the components of this law. The first part of this law is the concept of single-member district. This is a district where one person wins. There's only one available seat for one district. You may have many different parties or many different people competing for the seat, but the person that wins a plurality wins the entire district. The United States is unique when it set up its House of Representatives. It divided each state into portions or regions or districts. And instead of voting for a political party, you voted for a representative to go from your district to DC to write laws that represented their constituents or the people within that district. So even if you had 3 people that were running for election in your district, which is the 4th district, let's say you have Representative Geromin with the Green Party, Representative Richmond with the Republican Party, and Representative Davis with the Democrats. Let's say Representative Davis got 40% of the vote. Representative Richmond got 45% of the vote. And I got the remaining. Now, people still like me, except that's not enough to get even a seat in Congress. And unless I could get a seat in Congress, I'm never going to be able to make law. And if I can never make law, then nobody's ever going to know what I'm about. So they're never going to vote for me ever. There's no proportional representation. In Europe, where third parties survive, there is national elections where the seats in the legislative branch are allocated or given out in a way that each political party gets a percentage of the nationwide vote. There are no districts. In Europe, there are multiple seats at stake. If a party wins 40% of the vote, they get 40% of the seats in Parliament. So even if an obscure third party gets only 5% of the vote, they still get 5% of representation in Parliament, which allows them then to work on law and to start gaining a reputation for themselves. But because the United States framers were so anti-political party and so anti-parliament, they wanted to make sure that our system was not created in a way that would allow for any parties to gain control. Ironically, what they did is create a system where only 2 parties can dominate. Again, Duverger's law is centered on that winner-take-all plurality system. The winner of the most votes gets elected. Or the largest percentage of votes gets elected, even if it's not the most votes. Even if most of the people don't like that candidate, as long as they get the largest percentage of votes or a plurality of the vote, they win the seat, and there's only one seat to win. And it's not that we just do this for the House of Representatives. We do winner take all for everything. We do it for electoral votes, convention delegates, and seats in the House of Representatives. So it's almost impossible for those third party or obscure candidates to get elected. Okay. 2-party versus third party systems. There are some pros to the system, to 2 parties. It is very stable. Since both major parties want to appeal to the largest number of voters, They avoid extreme stances on the issues. They have a responsible party model. They want to make sure that they put out the best comprehensive policy programs for the entire nation because they want to win elections. They're committed to the programs and the policies, and they are strong and united enough to follow through to get things done. Cons, there's not a lot of choice. Because there's not a lot of choice, some people just don't vote because they don't feel like they're voting for what they really believe in. And there's less change. Because of the responsible party model, you're kind of worried about making decisions that are going to set anybody off or displease a potential coalition of voters, so you avoid making any major changes because you want to make sure you've solidified your re-election chances. Pros of third parties. Third parties actually do some pretty good things for us. When you vote for a third party, there is a perception that you're throwing away your vote because it's so difficult for a third party candidate to be elected because of our electoral setup. So if you were to vote for somebody who is a socialist candidate, you're throwing away your vote because they're not going to win. Or they're going to throw elections because all you're doing is throwing away your vote when you could have given it to a candidate that looks sort of like what you believe in, but actually has a chance of winning. But they do provide new ideas. The ideological or splinter parties are formed out of frustration or desire to change status quo. They serve as a safety valve for the discontent. Now, stay with me on this. The progressives and the populists place social and political reforms on the agenda. Now, after the socialists and the populists pointed out that there were some major problems that resulted from the Industrial Revolution, the major parties had to pass the progressive reforms that we know today, like workers' rights, safe working conditions, ending child labor, allowing for public education, a freer and more open election system. Third parties can be a voice for the independents. People that de-align from the major parties might find that their rational choice in selecting a party would be a third-party candidate. And it can increase voter participation, which is democratic, right? The third parties can also highlight problems that the major parties can't ignore. Like Ross Perot brought to the forefront, Ross Perot in 1992, who went against Bush and Clinton, he brought to the forefront the need to eliminate a federal deficit. Even though he didn't win, Clinton was forced to balance the budget. Cons. They throw elections. They do. Not only is the candidate not going to win, but they're going to take away votes from one of the major party candidates that probably would have won. This happened in 1912 when Teddy Roosevelt and Taft were two Republican-like candidates, and people didn't know who to vote for, Teddy or Taft, so they voted for either one. And what ended up happening is that Wilson won a plurality in most of the states, and Wilson, a Democrat, was able to win because those people who would have voted for Teddy or voted for Taft voted for one or the other, and they split that vote. Again, happened in 1948. In 2000, Nader, with his attention on environmental issues, was blamed for Gore losing in 2000 because he drew away potential Democratic votes. And they can create instability. There's too much choice and willingness to change. It can create an inconsistency, and if a minor party became the major power, they could violate the rights of the rest. So think like if we were to have a neo-Nazi party come up,